Thanks so much for being here today. Just a reminder, I am recording the meeting today for those of you who are not going to be able to join us this hour, and I will be sure to send that video link out in our upcoming BHI Network Policy Digest. So let's get started. We know we have people that will be coming into the space here as we're started, but let's go ahead and get started for everyone's ability to use their time well. We're going to begin with our land acknowledgement. We would like to open this convening by recognizing that we are on the unceded ancestral land of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional home of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. And I think we all know we cannot work to fulfill our mission and our vision of an anti-racist present if we don't first acknowledge and recognize the true history and the cost of colonization. However, acknowledgement is only a first step, and we urge you to engage in accountable relationships and informed actions. So just a few quick announcements here as we start. Please do be sure, as always, to send me updates and info that is for the policy digests that are good for the whole group here. I do look to you to stay informed, and as I hear more from each of you, it only helps to spread awareness around this priority that we have to increase Black homeownership. If you're not yet signed up for the weekly BHI Network Policy Digest, please do so. And please do feel free to invite others to do so as well. We want to always be growing this impact. We want to be welcoming to this network. So feel free to share. Our next monthly virtual meeting will be on November 13th. And this will be our last group meeting for 2025 and will likely be a pretty packed agenda. What happens is October, you've got a lot of work going on with legislators and their different people involved in their bills. But in November, they usually have them pretty solidified and they're ready to start discussing 2026. So it's probably going to be a pretty fast-paced agenda in November. Our December 18th event, which I am so looking forward to, our first in-person BHI Policy Summit at the Northwest African American Museum. You should be looking for registration towards the end of this month. I'm going to be putting that out in the digest. This is a limited capacity event, so I do recommend that you decide if you can prioritize it in your schedule, and if so, then you certainly register early so you can be in the room. And that Outlook invitation for the 2026 monthly virtual meetings will be coming your way by the end of this month. It is most likely we're going to keep this noon hour. That is basically because what we want to do is have legislators having time with us in this space, and it's much easier for them to get between their committee commitments and floor hearings, and floor votes, if they can maybe wiggle in somewhere between 12 and 1:30, although it's pretty packed for them once the session gets started, but we're trying to see what we can do. And so you'll be seeing that invitation coming at the end of the month. So in our time together today, we're going to start with an icebreaker. I know we're eager to hear from our policy champions, but I also think it's important to take a few minutes for us to hear from one another first. A Zoom meeting can feel kind of passive, but I'm trying to provide some more opportunities for some interaction. So I hope you will be ready to share how you transition to fall. Many of us have difficulty moving into the big dark, and given the state of our nation at this moment, this fall may feel especially challenging. So let's lift each other up with the things that we do to sustain ourselves as we transition to fall. After the sharing, we'll hear a new report and an upcoming event concerning the corporate ownership of housing from Lauren McGowan of LISC. This will be a great baseline of information as we advocate for Senator Alvarado's limiting corporate ownership of housing bill, and also Senator Orwell's corporate homeownership registration program bill in 2026. We are here together to increase Black homeownership, and that is challenged by a lack of supply. We don't need corporate interests buying up the properties that could be purchased by low to moderate income first-time home buyers. So interested to hear from Lauren more about that. Victoria O'Banion of the Northwest Cooperative Development Center is here today to present about Representative Salu Hutton's Mixed Income Housing on Faith-Owned Land bill. This bill didn't make it onto our radar last year, but we plan to advocate for its passage in 26. So Victoria is going to get us up to date on the change that this bill is looking to make. We all know that Black churches have always sustained their communities, and now they are developing housing opportunities on their land to serve their communities in a new way. I was very fortunate to be able to connect with many of you at the Community-Based Organization Summit and the Housing Washington Conference last week. And we're going to just take a few minutes towards the end here to hear your reflections on those gatherings, and especially how you feel they were able to further our shared priority to increase Black homeownership. Lastly, we will hear today about Representative Hill's Coordinated Land Banking Bill. It's going to be coming back in 2026. This bill had a late introduction into the 2025 session, and it's recently undergone a number of language refinements. We were hoping to have Nicholas Carr here to present to us today, but he has been called to a last-minute meeting. So it looks like Matt Hoffman, who is on the team who has been doing this rewrite, is going to be joining us to do the presentation today. So we'll get a high-level overview of the bill, and the reason we're getting more of a high level is that, as I said, legislators are very busy in the interim. They're ready to start in January, but they do their own personal job as well as their legislative work. And Representative Hill needed a little bit more time to sit with the rewrite and give her notes. So it really wasn't our place to be kind of releasing the bill at the moment. And so we'll get a high-level overview of the bill, help us understand how coordinated land banking can increase the low to moderate income housing supply, while also ensuring that community-based developers are developing the homes that are in their communities. Representative Hill is the communications chair of the Washington State Black Legislative Caucus, and she understands that underused public land can help us redress our history of housing segregation and discrimination. And that is only going to happen if the disposition of underused public land prioritizes that outcome and addresses kind of disposing of the land in a very coordinated fashion. We in this room have done a lot of championing of bills like middle housing and lot splitting, and we've created opportunities to increase Black home ownership. This coordinated land banking bill is kind of a missing link there, a very important one. This bill did come out of the work of the Scalable Starter Home Production Plan team, and that was funded by our 2024 CHA budget proviso that was hoping to address the supply side for homeownership. So this is going to be a lead item in our 2026 homeownership policy framework. I am going to be helping by convening a work group to ensure that the language in this bill produces the results we need to see, and that is also something we can all get behind. And then we as BHI will be using our combined advocacy to ensure passage in 2026. And as always, we'll end with a few minutes of open floor time to hear the important news from you, and feel free to use that space to share news that is good for the whole. And with that, we're going to get into our icebreaker. So I'm hoping that a few of you will lean in for a moment here and share a slice of your fall life with us. Some of the practices, the rituals, the traditions that you have that help you transition into the fall. Fall can be a difficult transition for a sunshine person like me. So, I know I have on my to-do list to charge up my light therapy glasses. I also do turn my attention inward in the fall as I prepare to celebrate Day of the Dead. My sense of communication with my ancestors is amplified during that holiday. It fills me up. It grounds me for the fall so that I can continue to do my part in the work of the struggle for justice. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see one another. And then I hope some of you will choose to go ahead and share a little bit about your fall transition, what you do.
This is Ishmael Mohammed. And
Hi,
I
Ishmael,
want to,
welcome.
hi, hey, good, how are you, Bambi?
Well,
I would say that for me, the fall is the manifestation of all the beautiful colors that the trees and everything surrounding us brings to us. So I look forward to fall as a reminder of the beauty around us.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. Who else would like to share how they build themselves up, getting ready, or how they reflect on fall? Kim?
So I have two things. Number one, I love pumpkin spice almost anything. And so that's like a yay, it's available. But then the other thing is, and those of you who know me well will you'll be like, of course she does. So in the fall, I haul out my brightly colored sweater wraps and all my boots with all those fabulous colors so that I am not dressed like a maple tree, but so that I'm dressed in the bright colors of fall and transitioning away from the cool blues of summer. So those are my two rituals: pumpkin spice lattes and pulling out my boots and sweaters.
Well, we can see that you're rocking the orange a little bit right now, a little bit of that mustard. So
Yep.
yeah. Is there anyone else who might want to share? Just what do you do as you transition into fall?
Hey, Bambi. I'm
Charles?
absolutely a fall person. I moved up here from Southern California to get out of the heat. And so I just, I love pulling out sweaters and my good fall coat and scarf. And I love Halloween, Dios de los Muertos, and any other kind of like nighttime fall activities. So we just went to the Fall Arts Walk here in Olympia, my wife and I, and we had a fantastic time. We love doing that every year. Hot drinks, whole thing, love it.
Excellent. And I think we have time for maybe one more person to share here. What are you doing for yourself for the fall? What does the fall mean to you? We all transition differently. Some of us are like, yay, finally pulling out the sweaters. Others of
Hey,
us,
Bam.
more challenging.
Bam, I'm happy to share. My name is Jason Gano. I work in government affairs for One Drop. And the reason I love fall, minus today because my HVAC died. So I'm going to have my camera off while my HVAC guy is behind me. But I love Christmas lights. I put up all my Christmas lights and just make them Halloween colored. And then the day after Halloween's over, they go Christmas colored. So I like to add my own colors to the holidays. So,
That's great.
and
You
I'm
have
also
the
rocking the
lights.
orange.
That's right.
Like
You have
Kim.
the lights and you just change the color. That is some serious efficiency there, Jason. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you as well.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for sharing a little bit. Again, I understand we're in a Zoom room. You're in lots of Zoom rooms. And that can get a little wearing, but we're trying to bring a little humanity in here, and we're going to do really great at that by having Lauren talk to us next, who is incredibly inspiring and always has that personal flair that makes you feel connected. Lauren is going to be talking to us again, as I said before, about corporate ownership of housing. We're going to see this in the session coming up, and there's also some exciting things happening in this moment with the newly released report and the possibility of attending an event. So Lauren, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Bambi. Am I able to share my screen?
You should. I have you as a co-host. There you go.
All right. Love it. Well, hi, everyone. Laura McGowan from Liz Puget Sound. Great to see everyone. Also a BHI core team member, and just really appreciate this venue and the opportunity to be with such caring, justice-oriented folks. So Bambi asked me to present because Senator Alvarado is actively working on some really exciting legislation, and LISC nationally recently released a report that aligns with some of that. The report was actually based on work in Kansas City. So I'm going to share some of the findings from it. I'm happy to share the full report with you. One of the topics for conversation could be, should we replicate this kind of report here locally? So appreciate you giving me the time. Ask for a little bit of grace because it is, the context is Kansas City, not the Puget Sound region. But I think really helps to amplify why Senator Alvarado is really thinking about this and why it's an important thing for PHI to pay attention to. So if you don't know LISC, LISC is a national community development organization and CDFI. We work all across the country on affordable housing, economic development, and racial justice work. We work here in Washington State, work all across the state with a concentration in the Puget Sound area. The Black Home Initiative is one of our core priorities. So this work was done in collaboration with the Kansas City team and our national research team. And they really looked at a couple of different questions. How many rental properties are owned by corporate landlords, and where do owners come from? What are the impacts of corporate ownership for tenants in terms of maintenance, quality, and eviction risk? What is the role of the housing finance system in driving the impacts of corporate ownership? And then what are the policy solutions that can address any of the negative consequences of corporate ownership and promote tenant security and well-being? They defined corporate ownership as entities that were incorporated as an LLC, a corp, or a trust, own 100 or more units in their portfolio. And for them, they were looking at folks, they didn't need to be within the particular Kansas City metro area necessarily. What we know is this is, LISC isn't the first entity to do this research. One of the things you'll hear about in the end is Urban Institute and LISC will be presenting on this, but also there's a wealth of other research that's been done around the country. But most of that research actually focuses on single family rentals. So more aligned with some of the work we've done within BHI. And what we know from that is that large landlords evict at 2 to 3 times the rate of smaller landlords. And they're more likely to evict with less money claimed as arrears. A lot of the previous research has been done in the Sun Belt and the Southeast, which is why they were really looking at this in the Kansas City area, and maybe a reason for us to think about what else we need to know in the Pacific Northwest. We know that corporate landlords evict more frequently, and that there's few studies on the specific role of the housing finance system. And as a lender in this space, that's something really, LISC is really spending some time thinking about. What is our own role in this? How are we supporting and ensuring that we don't see some of the negative consequences of this, both within our own financing and that of our peers and partners. So one of the questions is how many rental properties are owned by corporate landlords and where do those owners come from? For Kansas City, corporate landlords own almost 80% of multifamily units in the region. So that's a lot. And I think when they started to see those numbers, they really began to think about, okay, what is the kind of policy change, programmatic change, and other influence work that needs to be done in order to address that. Corporate owners are largely from outside the region. They own almost half of the multifamily units. And in the greater report, you can see where those folks are coming from. And, when we sort of do an early analysis, you can see similar trends in our region as well. So what does that mean? Like, why does it matter? Corporate landlords have about 1.5 times the number of maintenance violations per unit than non-corporate owners. So that's a big deal for families. Corporate landlords file for eviction at almost 4 times the rate of non-corporate owners. You know, as a region, we have done so much to increase tenant protections. So I think it's important for us as a community of practice to really think about how some of these other policies may align with some of the previous policies that we've worked on. And out-of-area landlords file for eviction at 3 times the rate of local owners and have over 2 times the number of maintenance violations. So again, having this like localized data, I think really is allowing that particular market to think about, okay, what are the solutions that we look at? What's the role of the housing finance system in driving the impacts of the corporate ownership? Properties with loans backed by the GSEs, so that's like the government-sponsored entities like Freddie and Fannie, are more likely to be held by a corporate landlord and more likely to be owned by out-of-region landlord. So again, as we think about, you know, what are the investments that are going into various properties, how are we using publicly financed dollars? It's important to understand some of the implications. So for Kansas, and I think this is maybe, you know, again, where we see and can take some of these recommendations and say, okay, what are we going to do in our own local market around this? One is to create public transparency about ownership and conditions, create proactive inspection and code enforcement programs, strengthen tenant protection, support tenant organizing, and expand rental assistance incentives, increase subsidies and affordable financing to move properties into tenant and community control. And then lenders and government agencies should ensure that mortgage lending benefits tenants. As I said, you know, this is one report. It's a snapshot. There's going to be a broader share out of this report with the folks who did the research on October 30th. Everyone's invited. I'm sure Bambi will send it out to folks, and we'll also send out links to the full report if you haven't seen it. But, you know, as Senator Alvarado brings this issue to the table, I think it's something that we really want to pay attention to as a Black homeownership policy group, and for us to really think about what it is that we need to know in order to be able to help push that forward. So do we need additional research in our market? Would that be helpful for us? And how else can we all bring some of our community partners to the table to really ensure that there are protections in place for the homeowners and community members that we all care about? I'm happy to take any questions. Bambi, anything else you were hoping that I shared?
Sure. I think I would just share the nexus that, you know, certainly that was geographic specific, but it's kind of a cautionary tale. We
Yeah.
don't want to get to 80%. So hopefully that lights our fire for why we want to start putting in barriers now. And then secondly, yes, it was talking about rental in majority, but if you think about it, if you are an investor, you are not going out and buying the highest priced properties.
Right.
You are looking at the lower end. You are looking at those that could potentially go up for home sale for low to moderate income buyers. You know, we talk about supply in this room constantly because if you do a search and you're looking for a particular range that's going to work for a low to moderate income buyer, there are very few out there. And if what we see is corporate homeowners coming, you know, home buyers coming in and taking up kind of the stock that could become homeownership, the stock that could support those renters who will become the homeowners of tomorrow, like these are very much interconnected. So it's not kind of like a cousin of issue. It's really important that we understand that we need to protect what we have out there and provide those as opportunities.
Yeah, thanks, Bambi. Yeah, Chris is asking for me to put the date and time of the webinar. I will do that right now. Any other questions?
Hey,
Just-
Lauren, this is
just
Kathy
one-
McCall with ARP.
Hey, Kathy.
Hey, did you have breakdown by like older adults? Because what we're seeing is a lot of older adults that have been living in places in an apartment and then it changes ownership and they're getting evicted. And it's just really frustrating, or their rent goes up substantially and they're on a fixed income. Did you have any kind of breakdowns on that? Because I love this area and I'm just trying to figure out how we can connect AARP to it.
Yeah, I love that. There is the report includes a lot of demographic breakdown. I need to check back in with my colleagues to see if there's an age breakdown, but I will get back to you on that.
Victoria, you had a question?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Lauren. I actually read this report on a plane and I like did not want to get off because I was like, no, we cannot stop. I'm not done yet. And I like I have tons of notes in it. It was great. One question that I had, and this you might not be able to answer the question, but one thing that I saw in the report was just this glaring lack of accountability for the GSEs and the loans that they're producing and giving to these investor owners under the umbrella of affordable homeownership, of under like some good, I guess I would say. Are you guys considering like mechanisms to holding the GSEs accountable to some of they're fueling and funding some of these practices? Are you guys considering recommendations to the GSEs, or what would that look like?
Yeah, such a great question. That is definitely something that we, along with some of our community partners, are having conversations around. I'll be honest, it's tricky, right? Like we're all so intertwined with so many of those entities. And I think some of the question is like, all right, who are the best advocates and champions? What is sort of like helping to illuminate this, and what is sort of like a big P policy move around it. But yeah, it is part of the conversation, and I will loop back with this group as we hear and learn more.
Pam, you had a question?
Yes, so don't throw sticks and stones. My husband and I are small private landlords, and we own 2 condos and 2 duplexes between Snohomish County and South Seattle. And my question is, do you know, Lauren, is this research talking about, and we have a little LLC, I'm the managing partner and he's the also ran. Do you know when they're talking about corporate ownership, are they also including these small little mom and pop LLCs, or is it literally corporate ownership? Like, okay.
Great question, Kim. This particular body of research looked at folks that had at least 100 units.
Okay.
So I think that is a caveat. And again, I think this is sort of like a question for me is, would this be valuable for us to replicate locally? And if so, what are the parameters? If they didn't look at age demographics, as Kathy pointed out, let's do that here locally. Do we, is 100 the right number for us in our market to look at in terms of, labeling that as sort of corporate? So I think there's some opportunities for us to think about what makes sense for us, so that we have the right data to inform the policy decisions and practice decisions we all make.
Right.
And Kim will never throw stones at you.
Never say never, Lauren. But yeah, no, it's one of those things that during the Great Recession, when I was still a mortgage originator, it was making me bonkers because my clients, first-time homebuyers, were losing out right, left, and sideways to big landowner, all cash. And it was like, you know, and yet the community is going to necessarily change over if you end up with an absentee corporate landlord and new tenants on the block. And I know we have all sorts of policies that prohibit any real kinds of preference, but that would be a piece of what we could learn from doing a local study. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Great points.
All right, is there maybe just one more question in the space or comment? And if not, then we'll be sure to be following back up with Lauren. And again, you know, Senator Alvarado, they were having a lot of conversations last year in writing the bill that they released last year. You know, what is that magic number? Patience?
Thanks, Bambi. I want to elevate that we are going to be working with Senator Alvarado, bringing back Senate Bill 5496. And we're going to ask members of this network to be a part of a core group to help drive that work. And then earlier this week, I was also in DC, and Lauren, I shared this with you. Urban Institute offered to do additional work just for our geography here in Washington State. So if we can take that capacity up to be part of supporting bill drafting and getting it to the finish line, I think that would make us very impactful.
All great developments. Thanks so much for that, Lauren. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn time over here to Victoria. Victoria is going to be talking to us about the mixed income housing on faith-owned land bill.
Thank you, Bambi. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria O'Banion. I lead cooperative housing development for the Northwest Cooperative Development Center. And I'm not speaking to you today in that role. I am speaking to you today in a role that I work with a group of people here in Spokane. There's a growing group of people that are looking at faith communities and faith properties. And as you can imagine, those faith communities and faith properties are often asset rich and cash poor, and they have declining congregations in those communities. So across the country, and looking specifically in Washington, there are several groups of people that are working with these faith properties to determine how to reinvent or re-envision their property to solve some of the housing needs that we have in Washington. These are groups like the Nehemiah Project, there's Design for Peace in Tacoma, and I work with Liminal Lands in Spokane. This bill actually came out of the group here in Spokane last year. We were late to the conversation last year, late to the meeting, and got something introduced, but it didn't make it fully through the process last year. There was some concerns about timing of implementation last year. And so that kind of held it up in committee and didn't push its passage through. The history of this bill is actually in 2019, the legislature did pass legislation that allows municipalities to adopt code that allows for higher density on faith property. The last year when we were working with our group of folks, the vision was potentially to, rather than allow municipalities, but rather require municipalities to update code and allow for higher density. That was the timing issue last year. The original bill had some requirements and timing that the Association of Washington Counties was not super excited about. We have since changed that and modified that, and the new bill that's coming out this session will allow for more flexible timing for the counties. Also with this change, the bill looks at sales tax exemptions, so allowing the developer and also at the end user of that property, some of the sales tax exemptions that are afforded to the faith community who retains ownership of the property. And then looking at mixed income, the original passage and the original statute, um, it allowed for low income individual use. You got the density bonus if there was housing for low income individuals. The statute that we're putting out, or the proposed bill that we're putting out this year, clarifies that and offers 50% of the units at 80% AMI and mixed use for the other 50% of the units. That's also at the discretion of the municipality. So the municipality could increase that minimum requirement for implementation at the municipal level. And then it allows for the leasing entities, so the developer, to pay all the fees and the mitigation costs instead of requiring the religious organization or the faith community to pay for those fees. So this piece of legislation creates a faster, quicker process for faith communities to be able to develop housing on their assets and on their land. We've actually seen this play out. Spokane actually already did adopt this. Spokane adopted it. Tacoma adopted it. So we have seen this play out in those cities and doing great work. And this bill actually just encourages other municipalities and cities to adopt this language for density bonuses and allow those faith communities to build housing. Happy to answer any questions. But that, like, I think one of the things that we wanted to share was like the background of this. It seems like a random piece of legislation, and it kind of was last year, and we're trying to formalize it and organize it and steward it a little bit better through the process this year. And we do appreciate BHI's support in this piece of legislation.
Are there questions coming up for anyone in the room? I know, the bill has many different layers in order to kind of create the impact that they'd like to see. Last year was a long session, but there were a lot of people working on bills till the last minute, coming in with bills, 3 or 4 weeks in. So I understand how it was off our radar, but super excited is no longer in that position, and thanking Victoria for that. It looks like Cliff, you have a question?
Yeah, Victoria. If I remember correctly, didn't Bellevue do something similar with religious organizations using their surplus land to build affordable housing as well?
Yeah, Bellevue might have adopted the like I said, it was passed in 2019, and various cities and municipalities have
Right.
adopted it and brought it into when they're doing their comp plan, but not everyone has. And so this bill makes it somewhat of a requirement to adopt it when you're doing your comp plan, and then also creates a better pathway for mixed use and clarifies the sales tax issue.
So I do have a bit of a question. So do you see any pushback from local jurisdictions or municipalities about this?
No, the only pushback, the Association of Washington County was the only pushback, and last year they signed in as other, and their concern was that the original bill last year required them to adopt virtually immediately, like outside of their cycle for code changes, and so this would allow more flexibility. The revised bill would allow more flexibility.
Awesome. And if you'll allow, I have one more very dumb question. But so in this bill, does it prevent jurisdictions from, let's say, making the zoning contingent on like public safety or like utility concerns or something like that?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to assume no. Or I'm going to assume that like the development, whatever the development is, would have to go through the same development process that any other development would have to go through. So I believe all of those concerns would be addressed at that time. But this bill, I don't
Jason?
think specifically calls out that.
Cool.
Jason, did you have something to add or a question there?
Just a quick question for Victoria. Victoria, you mentioned a revised version of this. I just was able to jump on, but a question about this. When you said that so it's no longer an option to have sort of what the density bonus is for these type of projects inside of the comp plan. So for jurisdictions that just adopted at the end of last year, would they just have to incorporate that by the 5-year check-in, or when would they be required to have this inside their development regs?
Exactly, at their 5-year mark. So yeah, the original language basically said you have to do it right now. Nobody would be happy about that. I understand that. So the revised language, right? Like nobody's gonna like that. The revised language says at the time that you're doing your comp plan is when the adoption needs to happen.
Okay, but just to clarify, so for jurisdictions that adopt that, were required to adopt by, the end of those in the Puget Sound that were on the 2024 cycle, so their next comprehensive plan update won't be for, 10 years. So there is a 5-year check-in. A lot of different land use legislation in the last year or two has been sort of required to be adopted by that 5-year check-in. So like the TOD bill last year. They have to adopt that by the 5-year check-in. So I guess I'm just looking like for those that have just adopted, when will their requirement be? And if you don't have an answer, that's fine. It's an important point for jurisdictions in the BHI realm.
Sure. Hold on. Circling back. This is language that was given to me by Curtis with the Association of Washington Counties that he liked.
Okay.
And I could drop it into the chat, but it basically says must adopt or amend by ordinance sooner than 6 months after their next periodic comp plan update, or 6 months after the next implementation progress report.
Okay, that's the 5-year check-in. Okay, that's perfect.
Yep.
I think that'll be generally fine for at least my local governments. Most of them already adopted sort of bonus densities as part of their comp plan update. So I think it wouldn't be a big barrier for most to put that in place.
Yeah, and if you're hearing pushback or concern about that adoption timeline, reach out. Like we're very flexible on the adoption timeline. I think that we just want to see it passed this year so that it goes forward.
Okay, got it. Maybe we'll talk Victoria a little bit more, but that's perfect. Thank you.
Sounds good. Yep.
All right, we have just a couple more minutes. Are there any other questions coming up for anyone? Any other comments? All right. Well, thanks so much for that, Victoria.
You're so welcome.
I know lots of details there, and there is the opportunity to go ahead and pull up that bill. And then just a reminder, the natural process when a bill has been submitted and doesn't pass in a session is for a lot of times to just have a second look. You need to incorporate what you heard from people. That is going to make sure that you have a stronger case for your bill and a sure path for passage. And so this is a prime example of that. It may feel like it's a lot of details, but really like devil's in the details. And it is the difference between whether or not you can get kind of a coalition of support or you land up with those difficulties that make it not as likely it's going to be something that you can move through. So happy to have some knowledge about what is happening here. It's definitely building on a lot of the work that we have already been seeing in different jurisdictions. And so this is again that philosophy of the state version of something allows it to be an opportunity in all jurisdictions. All right. Well, we're going to just take a little bit of a passive pause, and we're going to ask for a little bit more of people to go ahead and lean in here and participate in this next little segment. I was super excited to see many of you last week. The community-based organization summit that happened in the same location as Housing Washington's conference happened right before it started, before its kickoff. It was super well attended, to the point where, like, at some point I put in 5 chairs, then I had to put in another 10 chairs, then I had to think about, can I put in another 5 chairs? And so full house, a lot of interest. And I heard a lot of positive feedback from people. They were especially excited about, there was a large funders panel where funders basically went through and said, here's what we're doing. Here is how we want to encourage community-based development. This is why this development is important to us. And I think there were a lot of opportunities for connection that came out of that space. So if any of you were there at that event and you have reflections, I'd be happy to hear them.
I'll just jump in there. I thought that it was so short. I would have loved to have a lot more time to dig into some of the conversations, to ask questions of the panelists. It was a really great conversation, and be nice if it was a full day.
Yeah, 3 hours goes by pretty fast, actually. And certainly a topic that warrants as much time as we can get. So thinking about that for the future. Kim?
Ditto what you and Victoria just said. I would have thoroughly relished a full day for multiple reasons. I say this all the time when I'm talking about community land trust. The first word in community land trust is community, and every community is different. The first word in community-based organizations is community. And it was very energizing and powerful to be in the room with so many community leaders. And not that all of us had exactly the same goal, but we were all sort of, I don't know, jogging in step, or at least seemingly towards very similar goals. It was marvelous, and I totally vote for a full day next year.
Excellent. Any other comments around the community-based organization summit that happened kind of right before the kickoff for Housing Washington? Well, many of you were also likely to have attended the Housing Washington conference. Super excellent. I mean, people are still buzzing from it. I am sure that many of us are still kind of digging through our to-do list because, taking those 3 days away from what we're normally doing, it does have an impact on what's on our plates, but, it is important to prioritize the ability to come together like that. So I'd really be interested in your reflections on how you saw BHI elevated in the space, how you saw Black home ownership a part of the conversation there. It was certainly woven into the programming. The initial lunch plenary had, Michael from Civic Commons BHI is one of the people up on stage. We had the ability to have a BHI learning session that happened. Super packed room, incredible energy. We also had the ability to have the Scalable Starter Home Production Plan team do a little bit of workshopping or, getting some input about their report. And then the closing keynote was focusing on Black home ownership. So it was full circle for me. We also saw a lot of Friends of Housing Awards people who are working in the network. Anyone have something they'd like to share? Cliff?
Yeah, I will say that in addition to my enthusiasm in the comments, one thing that you touched on a second ago that I really liked was that the Black Home Initiative, and particularly Black home ownership, was woven throughout a lot of the topics of the session, and I'm processing takeaways for the AHAG meeting next week. See some of y'all there. But that, and also a lot of the sessions dealt with funding, dealt with different ways to bring down the cost of housing, which is no surprise, but particularly, and this was just a gut reaction I had to all of it. I found it really interesting that I found it really interesting how a lot of them really primed us to start thinking about funding and start providing myself and others with ideas about what we can do on either side of the table, whether nonprofit advocacy or government, to really push that forward. So like I said, I'm still processing a lot of it. I literally just like pulled out a folder of notes to go back and look at as we were talking. But yeah, it was fun. And kudos on the CBO summit. That was fun as well.
Thanks so much, Cliff. I was able to get my very tall person Cliff hug since I was able to see him there. Anyone else would like to kind of chime in about their experience at Housing Washington, or what they took away from it, right? It's a big undertaking for those who are doing it, for the commission, for commerce, for all the people involved in trying to make that happen. And so it'd be really good for us to hear, what did we take away? Charles?
Yeah. Oops, sorry. Paranoid. Well, I mean, outside of all the policy things, I find the Friends of Housing Award and the BHI reception, but the Friends of Housing Award especially, to serve as a bit of an antidote to current events at a larger level, at a national level. Not an antidote, but you can walk around with a lot of bad feelings throughout the day, if you follow the news a lot. So seeing the level of selflessness that is being demonstrated, but seeing it like lifted up, elevated, and like recognized was just really tremendous. Very hard to keep dry eye. And a really great, answer to like, why are you doing this? So that part, I think is tremendously important, and I appreciate it every year.
Yeah, it was a very impactful award ceremony, and the recipients of the awards had such beautiful comments to make. I was, definitely walking up to the commission afterwards saying there absolutely has to be tissues on this table, because I could barely hold this together through these awards, but it's always so amazing to be inspired.
For real, more tissues next time.
Daryl, would you like to share?
Thank you for volunteering me, Bambi. I
Well, you
appreciate
had your
that
camera
sometimes.
on.
Well, I think I'm largely in agreement with Cliff and Charles. The elevation of BHI, the accomplishments, the hardcore use and explanation of data underlying why we're using such interventions and how they work. And I think another big theme for us, especially in a room with folks that perhaps have not heard as much about BHI or the why behind it, is really to emphasize in real numbers targeted universalism. So CHA has now 780 plus new homeowners. Not all 780 are foundational Black, right? So we're demonstrating that if interventions, because of data, are being used, it actually lifts all boats. And that connection, I think, is important for people to hear. But most importantly for me, on a personal and professional level, just hearing the word Black, and being really focused in that way, because I'm in a number of other sort of, calls, weekly, national level stuff through NeighborWorks. And it ain't like this in the rest of the country, people. We're really fortunate that we have this network to do this work, because it is, as Charles said, really bad out there. News is awful, turn the volume down. But helping to remember that we're in a really unique position and we have a unique opportunity here to make a real difference. That is good for the shared priority, great for the shared priority, but actually helps the wider community too, is an important point. And I came away very filled up about that, and especially the focus on Black and Blackness, all that.
Absolutely. And I think, there was a part of the BHI, I think the last day when we had the morning and we were able to have the learning lab, right? Where there was just a lot of people talking about, you know, feeling recommitted to be able to do the work they want to be doing the way they want to be doing it. Elizabeth, Victoria?
Yeah, I would echo Daryl's sentiments and just being able to have that level of candor throughout the conference, being able to say we're working on Black homeownership, be unapologetic about that, be able to talk about what the realities, the challenges, not sugarcoat, actually gave me hope because I think a lot of us are in different spaces, both personally and professionally, where folks are feeling like they have to be quiet, or there's fear in our communities on many levels. And I think one of the ways that for me that's addressed, and I felt that throughout the conference, was when we can just name things. Just to be able to do that is very powerful. And we need to be really careful not to let go of that, because then we are capitulating and giving away that power.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Victoria?
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. And honestly, listening to some of the speakers during the sessions that are not from Washington, that were outside speakers, so came in to talk about different things, it really just made me proud of our state. They were talking about different things that like we see that we understand that, and we have created policy and framework and mechanisms to intentionally overcome some of the issues that other states are seeing. Like there was somebody from a attorney group, a group that advocates for tenant rights, and some of the things that they were talking about, I'm like, oh, we already see that, and we have mechanisms to overcome that. So it really just made me proud of Washington and what we're doing and supporting Black homeownership across the state.
Absolutely. I think we have time for maybe one more reflection. So if there's anyone else who feels like they want to, add their own particular perspective, what they came away with, what they saw in the space, please feel free.
One thing I would just add or really pile on right there is I think something, excuse me, where Victoria just mentioned about the importance of understanding of where we are as far as Washington is concerned, and where we are kind of in that space, in the broader space, when looking at the whole national perspective of it. We really are doing a lot of work, and that is largely because of the work that this group has already done over the last few years in particular, but even before that, to be able to position us in a way to be able to do this. Because this group was able to get the Covenant Homeownership account passed back in 23, that positioned us to be able to do a lot of the work that we've been doing now. Because the disparity report that came out that was started on back in 2021, that positioned us to be able to do a lot of the things that we're doing now. We are in a better place here in Washington than almost anywhere else in the country to be able to do a lot of the work that needs to be done now, that in other areas, like Daryl was saying, like Victoria was saying, that in other areas they can't do. And we really I do think it's important to take a moment to recognize that and be appreciative of the fact that we have that opportunity. And then also continuing, with the acknowledgement that it's going to be more hard work. It's going to continue to be difficult. It's going to continue to be fighting, but we're in a better position, and we have to do it, if only for everybody else, so everybody else can see that it can be done. And to hopefully help follow that mold of what we're already doing. So I think that that's just a really important thing to note, that we've done amazing work and there's still a lot more to do.
Thanks for that, Ryan. And we're ready for that work. We're invested. And I expect that, we will all be energized and ready to go at any moment here. We're leaning in, and we're going to continue to do so. It's great to have that palpable change in front of us. But, I think these are core beliefs, and we're going to keep them filling us up regardless. We will keep moving forward and that's what we're here to do together. So thank you all for being here. And if I didn't have the opportunity to see you, always feel free to reach out. For me, the next real opportunity to get all of those hugs and all of that connection is going to be at the BHI Policy Summit in December. And so I'm really hoping to see many of you there. I think that's going to be a really transformative event as well. All right. Well, let me make sure that we have our next presenter in the room before I go ahead and pull up the, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to run this for them. And so the last thing we're going to be talking about today is coordinated land banking. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Matt, if you are in the space, feel free to unmute so that I know that you're here. And I do know that, we had a last minute change here. We were going to have Nicholas Carr as the presenter, got pulled into a kind of last minute other meeting and unfortunately could not wiggle out of that. So Matt Hoffman has been on this team that was originally the Scalable Starter Home Production Plan, and a kind of subgroup of the people working on that plan, which was a really big undertaking to do that report and to make that plan happen. So Matt was part of kind of a subgroup who were excited to get legislation in 2025. It was a really big lift, right? Like you're working on a report, you're doing a bunch of things, and then kind of learning the policy process and beginning to get a bill together. So they did submit a bill for 2025, and that is the Coordinated Land Banking Bill 1974. I'm going to go ahead and put the link of the bill number in. So that's HB 1974, House Bill 1974, which is from Representative Hill. And there's Matt. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I was just saying, Matt, a little bit of that kind of lineage, but I'm sure you're going to be covering that in the presentation as well. So hopefully everyone can see my screen there. Any issues seeing it?
So.
Everyone's good?
Golden
All
Baby.
right.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt. He's going to talk to us about coordinated land banking.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Quick caveat. I'm pinch hitting for Nick Carr. He's part of the team. So we have a small working group, focus working group that's working on putting together, or rather refining, as Bambi said. This is the second go of introducing a bill for providing the opportunity for counties or cities to establish these coordinating land banks. They can also be called as land clearing houses, or effectively single purpose entities that are focused on securing land and getting it into hands of builders so that they can build and take that land out of the equation where possible. So why don't we go to the next slide? This is going to be a pretty short presentation. Take some questions and thoughts afterwards. But so what is coordinated land banking? If you can go to the prior slide, actually, and
Okay.
the what is. There's a
There we
couple
go.
points on there that I just want to hit that are important. So we're all familiar with the Covenant Homeownership Act. This comes on the heels of that, and we just released the Starter Home Production Plan. And so CHA expands access to homeownership for people of color, as we all know, and it requires that we have enough homes in the right place for participants to buy. And so that's important. We need homes, and we need as many of us as we can. So all hands on deck. We also just completed a starter home production plan that I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, that outlines how different or actually a playbook, two playbooks on how we as a state can scale starter home production for missing middle housing options. And in order for that to be successful, again, we need land ready for development. So these two I guess one's a actual account that's standing up, and another is a plan for moving forward. But the dependency on land is real, and adding tools to the toolbox for land securing and distribution is, a bit of a gap. The market is doing its thing, and we're just trying to help encourage the land acquisition through this bill. What else do we have here? Some key components to this. The intention here is for that the land banks would operate within the local housing jurisdiction plan. So if plans or if a county's adopted housing distribution is again, it's within the AMI buckets, and the land banks would be honoring those AMI buckets. Those would be their targets. So if a county needs a lot of homes built, 40% of their homes built in the 80 to 120 AMI, that would be a big focus of the land bank's priorities. So it's meeting the community's needs is a big component to that. And then strengthening the connection between the planning and action by helping the community shape how land is used and who benefits from it. So this is working with land developers who are ready to go and act on the land once it is secured by the land bank. So it's not land. Bambi brought this up the other day. Land banking has a connotation of just holding on to land. The idea is to move this land from inaction to action. Let's see. Yeah, let's go to the next
I
slide.
might have to comment, but I can just talk shit, yeah. Where's your library?
Hi, Jason. I think you might not know that you're not muted. I'm going to mute you back, and we're going to go ahead and let Matt continue his presentation.
All right. So what does this bill do? I'm not going to read off all of these, but a couple of the important things. So it would establish a land clearinghouse. So this again is a singular purpose entity. It would be certified at the state level. They'd be operating at either the county level or the city level, and they actually could cross over. The idea is to make this nice and flexible. So let's just say, for example, we'll use King County as an example. If there was to be a regional or a land bank there, it could be at the county level. And if Seattle wanted to have its own, it could have its own bank as well. Key point is they can't overlap geographies. So King County's jurisdiction for the land bank would be the area excluding city of Seattle. Similar dynamic could be in Pierce County, whereas maybe on the east side you've got two counties that are interested in having a land bank, but having two land banks operating in those counties doesn't make sense, and you can have a single land bank covering those two counties. So flexibility is important. Provides tax exempt holding for as well as priority access to surplus lands and tax title properties is another big one. I mentioned earlier requiring alignment with the local housing plans, critical component to this. Mentioned the regional flexibilities that counties can tailor approach. And by that, it's how do these get set up? Who are the entities that are running them? And the draft language allows housing authorities, nonprofits, public development authorities, I think that covers it, that may be eligible to operate a land bank. I'll use Pierce County as an example. They have the CDC there, their Community Development Corporation. If that entity was that entity exists and is functioning as a housing group that is trying to coordinate land activities in Pierce County, that would be a great example of a existing entity that could step in and perform these coordinated land banking activities. A couple other things real quick before I move on. Accountability is going to be really important. That's a big part of the bill. No net loss as well as anti-displacement are two other important parts of the bill. Allows for the bank to not only control hold and transfer, but also maintain and improve while it's holding it. So it can support some it allows for functionality for them to operate it as an interim use, which likely hopefully would be for an interim use. And then the bill also creates pathways for future state resources. All right. I'm not going to spend much time on this. There's 28 states, I believe, off the top of my head, that have state legislation that allows for traditional land banks. And these traditional land banks, I like to call them, I add the traditional in there because anyone can bank land, so to speak. But the state enabled land banks have this list of, these are the common powers of a state land bank. And as economic conditions turn, another, important part of this legislation is creating the framework for having these single purpose entities have these powers of, acquiring tax foreclosed properties. They're not acting on them. They're acquiring after the fact, extinguishing liens, holding properties tax exempt, having those powers in times where real estate conditions take a turn, and these land banks can help stabilize is the idea here. And the last slide, Bambi, is, so why is this important? So really two things: support homeownership equity and opportunity. So we have a great need. This also, we have a great need. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but really that's the crux of it. Homeownership opportunity, equity and opportunity. The other is the cost of land and removing hurdles or lowering the hurdles for development. So the idea is to help the building community build and take that land acquisition component of it at least away. Again, this is intended to be additive and not competitive with any existing activity in the home building ecosystem. And so the goal here is to reduce hurdles and lower costs. So we do have a draft of the bill into the sponsor, Rep Hill, out of Spokane. And she is currently reviewing it. I would really like to make that available for folks for comment. We're not going to be doing that until after we get a concurrence from Representative Hill. So, Mr. Donahue.
I'll wait till you're done, Matt, and then
That's it. That's the 5-cent tour.
Okay. So in that case, a couple of questions then. First is, based on what you just said there, I am assuming then that 1974, which is the bill that Bambi had mentioned, is it basing it, and Bambi, you're still sharing your screen. You may want to not anymore.
Well,
Sorry.
that would be good. Thanks. Thanks for telling me.
No worries. Still sharing, but
it's nice.
Yeah. I got it. All the bright green buttons that happen and the way that it all changes it. I love it.
So I guess my first question is the idea basically stemming from 1974, and it will be like, I guess, you said you had sent a bill over to her, or a bill language over to her, which she is reviewing. Does that mean that you're talking about a whole new bill? Are you talking about amendments to 1974? What, I guess I'm curious to know kind of where you're starting from is my first question. And then I have
we're starting from 1974. It's an evolution of it. It's a streamlining of it. It's simplifying it and creating more flexibility within it.
Got it. And then another question that I have is around, like I'm seeing there's, the advisory board and there's all these different things. And I haven't read the exact language. I'm just basing this off of summary that the legislative folks have put together for the old bill. But
Mm.
my question, concern, whatever it may be, would be that certainly in some jurisdictions, and maybe a lot of them, I could easily see where land gets banked and then none of it is actually practically made available to affordable home ownership providers, right? Especially if we don't have guardrails in the legislation that require that it become available to affordable home ownership, as well as affordable rental and shelter and whatever
Mhm.
the case may be. I mean, I'm just remembering years and years and years of commerce, in prior evolutions of it. So don't worry. But in prior evolutions of the Housing Trust Fund having almost no or zero home ownership funding, like I could see this kind of going in that same direction unless there are guardrails. I think there needs to be some degree of guardrails in that, including like this advisory board that doesn't actually have anybody who knows home ownership as somebody who needs to be a part of this, right? I don't know
Mhm.
that you want to require it, but I do think it's something that you should be encouraging, that kind of thing. I'm
No,
happy to
that,
chat with you more about it offline if you'd like.
yeah, no, one of the improvements from last year's bill is there was a target of 30-30-30 based on, you know, extreme low to very low, low to moderate, and then above. It's kind of, that was a blunt instrument and that was a holdover from some prior thoughts. And an evolution for this year is tying it to the county's targets, housing targets. Therefore, a portion of land will need to go to that, very low, extreme low to very low. A portion of it will need to see units developed on it for low to moderate and so on.
I hear you. The one concern I have is they could still hit those AMI targets and not open up anything for home ownership.
Right.
So I think like home ownership needs to be explicitly stated in there as a acceptable.
Yeah, and and I'll just mention again, as I did at the beginning of the meeting, the idea was to be able to have a work group beginning like imminently,
Yeah.
but we have a hold up in making sure that the latest draft iteration has eyes from the sponsor, and as soon as we get a go ahead from sponsor, then that will happen. So Ryan, love to have you in that room, and others who are interested certainly reach out to me, because that would be the purpose. The purpose would be, this bill came in 1974. It came in very quick in kind of last in the when would you submit a bill last year, but it came in, it created a base and it gave itself some visibility, and then it needed to be refined. And so that refinement is something that will continue, and that work group is going to be the real effective space to do that in. So feel free to reach out to me if you feel like you'd like to be in there. That's something that we would have hoped to have started at this point, but we can only do so much in terms of when we can move forward. I have Daryl and Jason, and then I'll just let you both know, we are running out towards the end of the clock here, so that'd be great if you could try to be a little bit brief.
Thank you. And I think most of my questions/concerns were articulated by our dear friend, Mr. Ryan Donahue. But I'll just sort of ask again, Matt. Are there mechanisms set up, or is there discussion to be had in terms of the dispensation process? I know it's different for different jurisdictions. So I guess my main concern is home ownership, obviously, Ryan's all over that, but also how does a program like this make sure that small, frankly, black and brown developers get to participate? Because just because we set up a land bank doesn't necessarily mean that the folks creating home ownership are actually going to be those folks that are committed to creating home ownership in the communities that need it most. We always come up with these things, and the result sometimes is same old does the building and benefiting, and we can't have that anymore.
Yeah, and that is reflected in the draft bill. Both of those topics. The emerging minority builders are represented in the text. And what was the first one? Home ownership. Well, you had something in between those two. But as you were talking, yes, to both. We have those represented in the text. the work group will go through the refinement and improvement and making sure that it's, clear. But yeah.
Thank
And
you.
then Jason, we've got 2 minutes.
I'll just note two things. Number one, as I've talked to folks about, I think this might be, another year of learning for the legislature in a short session on this bill and this concept. So just for advocates that are going to be working on this, this might be a 2026 passage if we're going to get over the hill on this one. So just, temper expectations, a lot of work to be done on this. And then number two, and I've made this, I've told folks this as well, and I've heard it here, I think I watched the legislature last year grapple with this. There was a lot of sort of consternation and confusion of how this would work. And I would just sort of temper some expectations on, continuing to add to this bill, only complicates it and makes that learning curve even higher for the legislature. So just, as folks from this group begin to work on it as part of a work group and add pieces to it or clarify it, amend it, just sort of keep in mind the legislature is not as housing savvy as you all are. And, moving this through needs to be a relatively simple concept for them to move. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thanks, Jason. And it frankly has been simplified significantly from last year's go. And to your point, this is likely, not likely, hopefully it can be passed this year, but I mentioned 28 states have approved these land bank. A lot of them have taken 3 turns at it. So appreciate your comment, Jason.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for stepping in. I know that was a super last minute ask, and I'm totally appreciative that you were able to make that happen and that we had this opportunity to start warming ourselves up to the topic. Yeah. And I have reviewed the bill with this smaller team for the last few weeks. And I can tell you, actually, I think it's some of the best written language I've seen in a bill. Very straightforward preambles, very much on target for a lot of the different types of comments that we've seen here, just thinking about it. Yeah, an absolute shout out to Crosby over at OneDrop, has done a great job with the writing, and all of the other members, Chris Collier was part of thinking that through as well. And of course, the Scalable Starter Home Production team, Matt wears many hats and has, that integrated viewpoint that's really important. So
Well,
excited to bring this up.
And Amy Manning as well.
Amy
Spokane,
Manning.
the Spokane
Yes.
Land Bank has been a big part of the group here. So
yeah, it's always great when you have someone in the room who's doing something that is down the line. You're like, what have you learned? So you're doing it. It's happening. So we want to make sure that intention of legislation comes to be through the implementation of the legislation. So excited for us to continue forward. Thanks so much to Matt. We are hitting towards the end of our meeting, and so I am just going to open up the floor at this point for news from you. So thinking about things that are for the good of the whole and that you're excited about, that you want to share in this context, if you have something to share, feel free to step in. We may have hit that bump of the first wave of celebrations and fundraising events and things like that. Maybe we're waiting for the next one, so maybe not as many announcements around things like that at the moment. Anything else coming up for anyone that they'd like to share? Right. I'm going to reiterate, we have November as our last monthly meeting, and yeah, that one's going to be pretty fast paced. We're going to be trying to talk about a lot of different things that have been forming but are in a good place to start, discussing and amplifying. And then we will not meet in December. We will have the summit. So the session will start in January. It's going to be a very short state session of 60 days, which is super fast paced. So there is going to be a lot happening behind the scenes between now and January. I will be sending out the new invitations for 2026. I am hoping to be able to have a January meeting that will fall before the opening of the session. And if that's possible, then we will also see the January meeting super packed, as we will have advocates wanting to, we'll have champions wanting to make sure that we're on their radar and helping us understand where their bills landed before we're ready to go in January. So unless there's anything else that anyone would like to contribute, you know, we can all get a good 5 minutes left in our life. And I will be sure to send this recording out for those who are unable to make it. And thanks so much for everyone who has been here today and contributed to the conversation. Always feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. This PowerPoint will become a part of the message in the policy digest along with the video recording.
Thanks,
I'll see
Bambi.
you all later. Have a great week.
Thanks, Bambi. Bye, everyone.
Bye.